how do you define intuition today? And how is it different from what most people think it is?
What if intuition is just this spark of insight that comes sort of out of nowhere that leads you into a potential direction? And there's been tons of people who've relied on intuition throughout their entire lives and careers. My favorite examples, Einstein, Steve Jobs quoted it a lot. Oprah talks about it. And the thing about emotions is they're by definition irrational. They're by definition illogical, right? They exist outside of the left brain predominantly. So these emotions, they're not meant to be thought about. They're meant to be felt.
That person may try to steal you out of money, this and that and there. So this is where the superpower of the woman now can help be the rudder on the ship. Because I think the man is like the ship, tears through the water, strong, powerful, brute force. But then the woman is like the rudder, is just a little bit of guidance here and there. We both need each other, but right now where we are, the ship thinks that he doesn't need the rudder, and the rudder thinks that it's the ship. And without the ship, the rudder can't move.
Hey Conscious Man 7 family, quick question before we start. Do you love the depth of these conversations but hate when ads break the flow? I get it. Ads can feel like speed bumps on a highway, pulling you out of that deep zone. That's why we created a way for you to enjoy every episode completely ad-free while supporting the show at the same time. For just a few bucks a month on Patreon or Locals, you'll get full access to uninterrupted episodes. You'll get direct access to me so you can ask me any questions that you have, some cool other perks like early releases, and you'll also help us keep bringing you the powerful conversations that mainstream platforms won't touch. The link is in the show notes. Join us there and be part of this movement. Ever look up and see those dull, grey skies streaked with chemtrails, and you feel your energy sink? You're not imagining it. Something in you knows the sky isn't supposed to look that way. But what if you could bring back the blue? What if there was a way to clear the air inside you and above you? That's where the Chembo comes in. They create powerful orgonite, tools that generate orgone energy, the life force that helps neutralize EMFs from your mobile phone, your Wi-Fi, and even 5G. It's nature's way of restoring balance, bringing cleaner air, calmer energy, and deeper sleep. Every piece from the Chembo is handmade, from tactical tower busters to beautiful pyramids and jewelry, crafted with the precise ingredients to generate real orgone energy. And here's the best part. They've proven it. For over 10 years, they've cleared thousands of miles of chemtrails, bringing the blue back to the skies around the world. So if you're ready to take back your weather and your well-being, go to thechembo.com. Use coupon code CM7 for 10% off and experience the shift for yourself. Don't fear the chemtrails or the EMF. Be empowered with the Chembo and never feel helpless again. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned, because we have some more great content coming soon. There's an intelligence inside you that's faster than logic, deeper than data, and older than fear. And most of us were never taught how to use it. Hello, beautiful and amazing people. Welcome back to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host, Todd Cave. Today, we're joined by Jessica Willis, intuition expert and founder of Intuition Mindset. She's helping people relearn the language of their own wisdom, teaching practical ways to activate intuitive intelligence, dissolve self-doubt, and lead from a deeper place of truth. Over the next 2 hours, we'll explore how intuition rewires the brain, how men and women reclaim their intuitive gifts, and why this inner voice will define the leaders of tomorrow. Buckle up. This one is going to challenge logic itself.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster, and then learn how to control it.
You gotta be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why like it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it, you know? Hello, Jessica. Welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today?
Hey, Todd, I'm well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm happy to have you here. And I'm really interested to get into some of the things that you talk about, because as we were talking before we were recording, I'm finding that intuition is something that is very much misunderstood, is not taught. And as I was telling you before, in my case, I learned it on my own, where like now my intuition comes more as like a voice. So I hear things. So the voice speaks to me, and I always describe it as the voice. But for some other people, it's like visions or thoughts and stuff. And so, I thought, to get someone on to delve deep into intuition and, explore some of the dynamics between men and women, how their intuition, I would guess to say abilities are different, how it looks like, and all that kind of stuff,
That's great. Yeah, it's a profoundly deep subject, and it's always been my aim to demystify it. Bring it into a more normalized space so that everyone realizes that they're quite intuitive. We just need to learn how to tune in.
Yeah, I very much concur that we have to learn to tune in. So you've spent years in high pressure environments, Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, even government agencies. What moment woke you up to intuition as the missing piece of leadership?
Yeah, it was quite a journey to that discovery. I would say that in some of those highest pressure environments, I would have benefited quite a lot from having my intuition with me. But because of the pressure, which came with a lot of emotional overwhelm as well, intuition seemed quite a bit pretty far away. And that was something in those environments that I felt distant from myself, like almost as if the pressure and the overwhelm was winning. And it wasn't until I got out of some of those high pressure environments that I started to come home to, wait a minute, this is how my brain likes to think. My brain likes to perceive things outside of overwhelm. What was I doing that whole time, being so stressed out all the time? Where was my brain? Where was my mind? And so kind of looking backwards is what walked me into a more intuitive mindset. I don't think we have to get rid of chaotic environments in order to hear our intuition. But when you're first learning the dance moves, sometimes a more emptier dance floor is useful, so that you can learn to discern the deepest parts of your intelligence speaking. And that is something that we can get into about the subtleties of intuition. But I would say those high pressure environments created a crisis point for me to be like, I have to do something differently here, because this level of stress is starting to take me out of the game. And it very nearly did. So quite an interesting journey with all of that. And I have a lot of empathy for people who feel overwhelmed and disjointed in high pressure jobs and high pressure careers, because you might feel very far from yourself.
So did you leave the environment then that you had the awakening, or was it during the environment that like it all started to, like, I guess you could say, collapse? Because I find that in my own journey and in all the people I've spoken to, there was just this collapse where this watershed moment that it all dissolved. So what was that like for you?
hard. and you nailed it in terms of how that all came to be. There was a series of collapses, and it was like this one career that I was in, I just started to get kind of disillusioned with the pressure of it all and consistently feeling ineffective. And so I separated from that job to find myself. And I traveled internationally for a while and did some international service-based nonprofit type trips. They were amazing. And it started to wake me up a little bit more slowly in that you don't need pressure to thrive. You don't need super aggressive structures and systems to tell you how to live your life. You can actually self-determine that a bit on your own. You don't need to constantly be worried about money 24/7 in order to be a good person or to live in the Western world. So all of these beliefs were just getting challenged one after another. And then a couple of careers later, I entered into them and then went, gosh, this is just another high pressure environment. And it just kept iterating and iterating. So I'm not going to say that it was the careers that were the problem, but they certainly were the pathway to nudge me out, because I just got really comfortable with that pressure equals success narrative. And it wasn't until I started challenging those things with different experiences that a new aspect of my thinking started to emerge. A new consciousness, if you will, started to emerge. So God bless those really tough environments and bless the journey that took me to my breaking point to say, I have to start doing something differently. And it all started with my mind, and it all started with how I was thinking. Those jobs took a toll on me in terms of emotional suppression. So in high stress and high pressure environments, it was like, don't feel too many emotions because it might overwhelm you. And so of decades of just shoving down emotions, being too busy to feel them, eventually I developed quite a number of health concerns and health issues. And so that was kind of a parallel journey that was going along with this, changed the way I was thinking, but also what are these emotions trying to tell me? Once the emotions got a chance to express themselves, the issues in my health started to go away as well. So that taught me quite a lot in parallel with how do I think? What are these emotions for? And there's this voice that's coming up. What is that voice all about? Like you, I hear intuition as a voice. So quite a journey to lead me to this intuitive mindset, and quite a tough one. But it's been my goal to help people navigate the journey with hopefully fewer road bumps with a bit of the experiences that I've been through.
I totally get what you're talking about, having to find yourself, because I changed country, changed language, changed profession, changed everything to find myself. Took a lot of psychedelic medicine to help me. And then to have a similar journey where you have discovered that intuition is a lot more important than I was taught, So when you started Intuition Mindset, what internal resistance did you face, and what lesson did it teach you about trusting the unknown?
I would say starting any entrepreneurial journey is an exercise in faith in yourself and in the universe. I firmly believe that you cannot be an entrepreneur unless you have faith in something bigger than you, because it's tough. I mean, every single limiting belief, every single thought, habit, anything that was not in alignment with where I was going was being put on the table and challenged. And so, trying to be an entrepreneur, but not really liking putting myself out there, trying to be an entrepreneur, not really liking being vulnerable, trying to be an entrepreneur and having tons of money issues, or money mindset issues, I should say. And so every turn of this entrepreneurial journey had me face yet another part of myself. And I'm like, man, is this just what life is? Because the way I was raised, I thought life was about career, 401k, couple of kids and a family, and then you die. And for some reason, that path, I don't want to say it lacked something for me, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And so in the journey to create intuition mindset, it was this really deep desire to teach something valuable based on tons of research and tons of experiences and listening to thousands of people's brains and how they process information. And at the same time, taking the leap into a journey that I swore I was never going to do. You know, when the spirit within me says, hey, you're going to be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, no way. Absolutely not. You crazy? Like, I love getting paychecks every 2 weeks. I love that consistency and certainty. And you want me to take a leap off the deep end? Well, what's going to guide me? And then the answer was, your intuition's going to guide you. And I'm like, that's crazy, but fine, let's go. So that's how we got here. And 5 years later, just about 5 years later, I'm such a different person than when I started. You know, I would perceive myself as stronger and more in tune and more focused, definitely analytical. And also, I know what success means for me. And so I finally landed on a definition of success that wasn't conditioned or part of the corporate narrative, although that's great for those that align to it. It was a different kind of success. And so it's neat that this journey took me to a place where entrepreneurialism woke up some of the deepest reaches of my spirit. Stuff that I didn't even know was in there until the challenge appeared.
I concur 100%. And I'll be honest, right? Like, I think that being an entrepreneur is probably the single hardest thing that a human being will do in their life journey, because most people don't really empathize with entrepreneurs because they've never had to do it. They don't know what it's like to put themselves out there, especially now in the age of social media, where you have to market yourself to people. You have to do it in a way that comes off that is not marketing, but it resonates with people and you have a message. You also have to have integrity and authenticity in what you do, because you can only pretend for a certain period of time. And then you also still have to find strategies and ways to find the right people that you want to reach and stuff like that. So a lot of people, they don't get that people have to pitch them and they have to pitch people. So like, I pitch people all the time. People pitch me all the time. So I have a much different respect for people when they pitch me, because I'm on the receiver end of it. And sometimes, like, I would get a message and I would know exactly where this is from the beginning, because obviously as an entrepreneur and a marketer, you can tell because you use scripts and you've been taught how to do what you do. And sometimes I would just check out the person. If they're, they seem genuine, even if it may be a little bit clunky, I would give them an opportunity because I remember I was there. But unless you've walked that journey, you'd be extremely brash, dismissive, and blunt until something happens to you and you have to go and put yourself out there. So I just wanted to highlight to people that when you see anyone out there that's an entrepreneur and doing anything on social media, it took extreme amount of courage. It takes belief in oneself. Every belief about yourself is challenged every step of the way. Because is it going to work? Are people going to like me? Will people want to listen? X, Y, Z. So one of my mentors said, Todd, you focus on building the network and people will use it. Don't worry about the users. Build the network and people will use it. And I said, okay. And here we are on the Conscious Man 7 podcast, and we're talking to Jessica Willis.
That's great advice. And one thing to add to that I think is kind of interesting, if we were to look at rites of passage historically, what does it take for the man to become a man, from boy to man? And what does it take for the woman to go from a girl to a woman? There's some kind of transitionary element, a rite of passage. I almost think that entrepreneurialism in some small degree is sort of like that rite of passage, where you go out into the world and you navigate it on your own, largely, and you've battled different elements to come back victorious with something to share with the rest of the tribe. And so I just kind of think that for those that are thinking about taking the entrepreneurial journey, it's one of the most challenging yet rewarding and purposeful things that someone can ever do for themselves. And it requires intuition. You got to have some kind of guiding light to take you through the wilderness.
Yes. I never thought of it like that. But my mate, he always says that he calls it, you have to cross the Rubicon. And what you talk about, this rite of passage is what I was telling one of my clients yesterday about the hero's journey, right? Basically, it's the same thing. And I said to him that, because basically, long story short, his fiance doesn't understand what he's doing. He's had great results since working with me for the last 6 months. And everyone is telling him that he's changed, but he's changed for the better. And I said to him that one of the things you're going to realize is that when you're on your hero's journey, no one is going to understand until they start their own hero's journey. And what you said just now, I never thought of it like that, but I do concur, and it resonated with me highly, where entrepreneurship is almost like the rite of passage from a man to a woman, a boy to a man, and a girl to a woman, because unless you put your hat in the ring and know what it is like to have to depend on yourself 100%, and you don't have that security of a job, I think that most people will not only crumble, but it scared them so much they wouldn't even start. And in my case, I was forced to start. I guess in your case, maybe it was kind of the same.
Same.
And I think that when you're forced to, I think that the caterpillar becomes the butterfly. But, when you're given the choice, most people remain caterpillars because it's comfortable and there's just plenty of shrubs to eat, and it's all provided for you,
Yeah.
So how do you define intuition today? And how is it different from what most people think it is?
Well, what I run across by and large is intuition. That's woo stuff. That's super woo woo. Like, I don't really understand what that means, but I think what they're saying is intuition somehow mystical, or it's supernatural, or, by and large, the rap that it gets from, I don't even know where these perceptions come from. Maybe we're taking it from popular stories where the intuitive person was talking to God, and so people, how they conceptualize intuition, think that it's something otherworldly happening and therefore not accessible to the everyday common person. And while I've done a lot of deep research in terms of how intuition has shown up throughout history, which is fascinating, when we look at how the Greeks interpreted intuition, they saw it as something that helps divine an answer. And Aristotle would have said that in order for an intuition to arrive, one needs to be empty-headed or blank-minded, which is exactly, from my perspective and all my research, how that works. In order for an intuition to arrive, you sort of have to suspend logic and suspend what you think you know in order for an intuitive insight to drop in. So when I first am introducing the concept of intuition to people, I ask them to consider, what if it's an epiphany? What if intuition is just this spark of insight that comes sort of out of nowhere that leads you into a potential direction? And there's been tons of people who've relied on intuition throughout their entire lives and careers. My favorite examples, Einstein, Steve Jobs quoted it a lot. Oprah talks about it, that she built her business on intuition. Sarah Blakey, the founder of Spanx, multi-billion-dollar industry, says the same thing. So it's not necessarily something to be feared, nor is it something that's just so bizarre and mystical that it doesn't have practical implication. But in all of this, intuition, by definition, is, to me, the guiding compass, the inner wisdom that always has something to say to you personally when you seek it out. So it's the voice underneath the louder voices. It's the voice underneath the critical inner voice. It's the voice underneath the self-judgment and the emotional chaos. It's the deepest and most wisest part of ourselves that has your next best step always available to you. So if that kind of a definition helps to normalize it a bit and helps to say, hey, everybody has intuition. It's just a matter of clearing away the cobwebs and the noise in order for you to discern it and hear it, then that's what we got to do. And when you tell somebody, hey, wouldn't you like to have a little bit less noise in your head? Maybe clearer, pinpoint, you ask a question, you get a response, and you recognize that response as the voice of truth speaking within you. Can we afford not to have intuition at this point?
It is true. Intuition, I use intuition now completely because I used to be a civil engineer, and that is a very logical black and white job. You are given a plan and you're told, go and build it. And you have to reverse engineer how it's built from the plans, because you're looking at a final structure, and then you have to look at how it will work from the foundation up. And like with me now, it took a long time before I had to realize that I can't only use logic to solve the challenges that I have, because it was always for me about doing, because that's what we did in engineering. You go and you build. Did you get that wall built? Yes or no? You know what I mean? Did you sign that document? Yes or no? It was always very black and white. And the more you did, the better you appeared as an engineer. But it's not necessarily like that in life, where sometimes doing more is actually less. And I think that intuition allows you to work smarter.
Yeah.
So if you're a person like me that works hard, you can merge the two, the hard and the smart. So that's why we call optimization. But I think that a lot of people focus on either working too hard or just not even having a plan to start, Yeah. So if you have these two completely polar opposites,
Totally. And there's an interesting concept about intuition, misnomer, that people think that intuition is not in science. They think it's not in engineering. They think it's not in all of these categories in which logical, structured, and analytical thinking is king. And throughout different points in history, we've found these rare people that credit their success or credit their genius ideas that come through to their intuition. Jonas Salk being one of them. He was the inventor of the polio vaccine, or the discoverer of the polio vaccine. And he says that his intuition is a guide. It tells him where to think next, where to look next. And if you're trying to solve a virus like polio, you're going to need intuitive and creative insights, because I can imagine that would be a very tough undertaking. So no matter the complexity of the task, engineering, building a cathedral, solving a crazy virus, whatever, the person engaged with the problem solving benefits from having an intuitive mindset to say, like, this is such a big thing. Where do I go next? What is the next best thing that I need to be looking for? And so if we were to simplify what intuition is at, first, the interpersonal level, it's the voice of truth speaking within me. It's also the thing that can tell you, hey, given all the information in front of you, this is your next best step. So it takes tremendous complexity and it simplifies it into something that's palatable and easily done and practical. Because I think that's where people get afraid with intuition. Like, if I start listening to my intuition, it's going to tell me to do some bananas thing and jump off a cliff or, become an entrepreneur. Just kidding. Please do that if you're interested in it. But things like that, they think it's always some giant leap of faith, when in my experience, for those who use it regularly, it's just telling you where to go next.
Yeah, most definitely. So you teach that intuition integrates the brain, emotion, and subtle awareness. Can you break that down so we can feel how intuition actually works in real time?
Yeah, I'd love to. This is so much fun. Okay, so we've got the left brain and the right brain and the subconscious mind. Think of that in threes. The left brain is really good at breaking down big, complex things into bite-sized pieces. The right brain is really good at bringing abstractions into the bigger picture. What's interesting is, caveat, the left brain is incapable of seeing the big picture, and the right brain is actually not very interested in breaking things down into small bite-sized pieces. So we need both sides of our brain to think really well. So to be solely left-brained or solely right-brained is imbalanced, in my opinion. Now you've got the subconscious mind, and this is so cool. The subconscious mind has been recording 11 billion bits of data per second since the day you took your first breath. So since the day you came onto this earth and you started looking around your environment and sensing it and feeling it you have way more than 5 senses, by the way. You just started perceiving your environment. Your subconscious is recording all of that data to the tune of trillions and trillions and billions of bits of data, depending on how old you are. Where does all that data go? It's all contained within the subconscious mind. So intuition then becomes this bridge between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, between the thoughts that you know you're thinking and the thoughts you don't know that you're thinking, the thoughts that are underneath the water, if we're using the iceberg metaphor. Underneath the water, that iceberg's huge. You've got a ton of information at your disposal. Things you like, things you don't like, situations you've been in, you've seen how they've worked out, things that you've seen that didn't work out. All of that has been put into this repository and it's ready for analysis. So how do we get there? Well, the first thing is the left brain, it's going to think it knows how to access intuition, but it actually can't because it's not able to separate from the subject enough. The right brain, however, knows precisely how to access intuition. And here's kind of how that works. There are 3 levels of intuition. The first one being primal and instinctual. The first one being really based in your survival. The intuitive instinct for a hunter-gatherer is, I'm getting a really weird feeling about that cave. There's probably a bear in there that wants to eat me. That's an instinctual, survival-based level of intuition. We all have that. And everybody runs around, I don't know, I just got this feeling like I shouldn't walk down that dark alley. Or I just got this sense that I shouldn't take that job, and I have no idea why, but it's almost as if my body won't let me. That's the first level of intuition, the instinctual part. The second level of intuition is emotional. And this is where people have a hard time with it, because in order to discern your intuition clearly, you have to have a really good relationship with your emotions as well. And this is where highly left-brained people have a hard time crossing that bridge, because it means you got to get out of the logic and you got to get into your feels. And most people don't want to do that because feels are scary. And I get it. I was that person for most of my life. So in that emotional side of intuition, and this is where most people can access it right now, is that whenever you're having a really big emotion, it's just like this wave that comes in. So the emotion comes in and then it crests, and then you get on the other side of that emotion. When you look back at that emotion and you say, what was that big emotion trying to tell me? The response that you get is your intuition. It's an intuitive sense of, that emotion was trying to tell me something. That fear was trying to alert me to something. That anger was trying to get me to create a boundary. That sense of disgust was telling me, that thing's not for me. So at the second level of intuition, for those that are deeply invested and willing to feel their feels, they're already ahead of the game intuitively. The third level of intuition is sort of when we have that emotional intelligence mastered and we bridge deeper into the subconscious mind and we get to pull out all of this data and information that's accessible to us of, yeah, I like that. No, I don't like that. Yes, that will be my next best step. No, that is not my next best step. And for whatever application you're going to use your intuition for, that third level of intuition, the one where the voice is always speaking to you, I call that higher order intelligence. Basically, you've organized your mind in such a way that the treasure trove of information from your subconscious mind is accessible to you. But you can only get there through the right brain. And the only way you get through the right brain is by being willing to have a relationship with your emotions. And so to walk this all the way back, the logical mind is not the enemy here, but it's not the one that needs to be leading when it comes to intuitive mindsets.
Okay, very, very interesting. So is this the reason why men find it a little bit more difficult to tap into intuition? Because in my case, I was forced. I'll be honest. Like, it just got to a point where the pain got so much and I broke. My personality, my identity broke. And in that breaking, then I got aware that, oh, okay, this is the thing that I need to use. But if men don't break, let me rephrase that. Is this the reason why then, because we are so logical, that to get into our fields, then to access that higher brain is the reason why, because of our genetic makeup?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the genetic makeup, but I can definitely speak to the
Programming.
emotional awareness. You know, men, by and large, are not educated to feel. You know, I mean, I've heard horrifying stories of how tough guys were raised. You know, boys don't cry. And, you know, all of these different quips to just basically say a boy or a man is not meant to have an emotional range. The crime and tragedy of that is that if you suppress and numb out one emotion, like sadness, you run the risk of numbing and suppressing all of the emotions. So I can't tell you how many people I've run across that got really good at numbing out fear or sadness or some giant emotion that was just too big for them. And then you ask them, like, well, when do you feel happy? And they're like, happy? What do you mean by happy?
What's
happy?
that?
Yeah.
What's that?
Exactly. How about joy? And they're like, joy? What are you talking about? And then
Not in my vocabulary.
Exactly. And then you ask them about, like, you know, I'm just feeling so alive and vital. And because that emotional language was turned off at such an early age, they're not able to access, you know, feelings of a bigger and more fulfillment and a more complete nature, which just sucks. Like, we weren't meant to live like this. But when I was in, like I said at the beginning, those high pressure, high crisis type of careers, emotional suppression was all I could do, because it was so overwhelming all the time that I'm like, I don't have time to process these emotions. If I process one, I'm going to fall apart and break, as you said. But for me, the pathway to my liberation and curing my health issues was the break, because that's when all the emotions flooded in. And I was like, well, sink or swim, I got to learn this. And it was tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, it was sink or swim for me as well, to be honest.
Totally.
So you've said that nervous system regulation is essential for accessing intuition. What's one practice anyone can do daily to strengthen that connection?
Oh, this is cool. It's feel your feels. All right. And when I say that, people are like, no, I don't want to. And I totally empathize and get it. I was one of those people. So there's some interesting facts about emotions and about nervous system regulation and about getting your nervous system to trust you again, because most of our nervous systems operate, well, by being driven by the mind. So the mind is like, don't feel, just barrel through the day. And the nervous system's like, well, brain, if you're going to tell me to just not feel and to gaslight myself into when I'm feeling anxious and just numb and suppress all these emotions, the nervous system starts to not trust the brain. And that's endemic right now, I think. So, to partner with our nervous system, we have to feel the feel. Every big emotion is kind of like a toddler. It's kind of like a 2 or 3-year-old running around in her head. And all that toddler wants is your attention for just a second. So a big emotion like fear or anger or disgust or sadness or confusion is just going to run around the background of your mind until you turn and face it and go, what do you want? And then the toddler emotion goes, nothing. I just wanted to make sure that you saw me here. And then the emotion turns the volume down. So for emotional regulation and nervous system regulation, when you spend 90 seconds focusing on a big emotion, and it's almost like you give it a microphone and just let it speak. Like, all right, sadness, here's your microphone. You get to rant and tell me everything that you're thinking and feeling for 90 seconds. When you do that, what ends up happening is the sadness goes, thanks for seeing me. Thanks for acknowledging that I've been running around the background of your brain. And it turns the volume down and it stops affecting you from the background of your mind. And I've done this with hundreds and hundreds of people and hopefully thousands at this point. But emotional regulation is defined by our willingness to simply look at the big emotion and say, what do you need? Just go ahead and express yourself. After the volume gets turned down, then we have an opportunity to choose what we want to feel next. And in that moment, so many more emotions are available to us. Like, all right, I felt sadness for 90 seconds. It sucked. It had a lot of things to say. I feel better. And now I want to feel calm. And the mind goes, all right, let's feel calm then. But when those big emotions are running in the background, they tend to create a cacophony of just too much stuff. And there's too many toddlers running around. So nervous system regulation then becomes, I'm willing to sit with myself for a minute and a half and see what's going on in there.
Wow. I mean, even though it seems very easy, it's very, very hard to do, because to just like feel the feelings, because, and you know, the thing is that we tend to get so attached to the feelings that it becomes almost like a drug, where we keep needing to have that drug and that addiction. So for someone that's saying, well, if I think about it, like, I can just keep going. So how you mean give it attention? Like, if I give it the attention, it's just going to keep going. And then I can keep thinking the thoughts about that thing or that person or that job that failed. And then I can just think more things and then more things and more things. So why would I give it the time or the day? Because it's just going to make me keep thinking in that cycle. So how do you reply to someone when they say that?
Really great question. The reason why we set a timer for 90 seconds is to create that boundary where we say, all right, in 90 seconds, big emotion, this is your time limit. And this is the boundary. The mind loves boundaries, especially around big amorphous things like emotions that feel like tidal waves. So when you set a timer for 90 seconds and just say, all right, I'm going to give you a microphone, say what you need to say, it will. And the thing is the thing about emotions is they're by definition irrational. They're by definition illogical, right? They exist outside of the left brain predominantly. So these emotions, they're not meant to be thought about. They're meant to be felt. And that's where people mess up. When they give these big emotions a microphone and you see like, God, when fear speaks to me, it speaks loudly, it speaks pressured, and it says a lot of crazy stuff that isn't true. But that's what fear does. Fear just is fear. It creates a tension within us. And when you can observe what fear is telling you, you get to choose at that point, is that true? I guess not. Well, why would I listen to the voice of fear? Or why would I try to push that voice of fear down? Let's just listen to it and see what it has to say. And then I can choose from my own agency at that point if that's true. And the thing about emotions is they make terrible storytellers. They really do, especially like raw, unprocessed emotions. They're going to create and spin up a narrative it's usually pretty far from what actually happened. Yeah, it's our perception of events, right? And so if we've got a lot of unprocessed emotions, our perceptions of events is going to be skewed and flawed. So it's not to make emotions the enemy. I actually have a theory that emotions are diagnostic tools, and they can be very, very, very helpful in discernment. But at its core level, when we've got a ton of unprocessed stuff, the best practice way to re-regulate your nervous system is just 90 seconds and create a boundary around it and say, all right, fear, I'm terrified of you, but what do you have to say? And for 90 seconds, you listen to it, observe it, don't judge it, and say, okay, is that what I want making my decisions for me or not?
That's a very, very interesting distinction there and a concept that I'm actually going to try, because I used to do something a little bit different where I would just like let the feeling occur for 90 seconds. And then after that, I would just shift my attention off of it. But what you're saying is like, I guess you're giving it the mic to just spew everything out, just spill out its guts. And then when it's empty, then you say, okay, then thank you very much for that information. Next,
Exactly.
So I'm actually going to try that. So I think that's a very, very interesting and cool tool that we can use in our lives today. So where do you see the fine line between emotional intelligence and intuitive intelligence, and how can one feed the other?
Yeah, and this dovetails alongside what we just talked about, in that a ton of unprocessed emotions is going to create a chaos in the mind. And when people are not used to processing their emotions, okay, they have to work a lot harder to think, because they're trying to make their prefrontal cortex and executive function push through a lot of inner noise. And so when you get strategic with these big emotions and like, all right, fear, you get 90 seconds. And a little while later, anger, you get 90 seconds. You start to process these feelings. And then you realize, again, the toddlers don't get to run the show. You just get to listen to them and say, okay, you done? Did you tucker yourself out? Awesome. Now I'm back in charge, and the I'm being your inner self or your inner wisdom. So after all of that, I would say there's a point when you get so good at tuning into, oh, big emotion, pause. What does it have to say? Then you start leading yourself into emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the ability to discern your own emotions and what they have to tell you, and the ability to understand and recognize other people's emotions too, which is something we're not great at as a society, I think. EQ, good emotional intelligence, means that if you're willing to sit with your own emotions and count them as valid, how much more gracious can you be with somebody else's emotions and count them as valid, or at least not be totally offended if they're losing their mind? If somebody's melting down, you don't freak out because you look at them and you're like, wow, oh yeah, I remember when I was that afraid. Are you okay? And you can actually have some compassion for somebody who's in a big emotional meltdown. But if you don't have emotional intelligence for yourself, then sitting with or even being okay with somebody else's meltdown is virtually impossible. So that's just kind of a caveat in my soapbox for good EQ. But once that lends itself and the mind gets really healthy and it starts to recognize, okay, these emotions, they actually can turn into diagnostic tools for me. That's when it starts to bridge into intuition. And this is really fun. Sadness then becomes an intuitive call out for, hey, that thing that you're sad about, that was really important to you. Take time to honor it. Take a beat to really honor what was lost. And therefore, we get this intuitive relationship with sadness. And we're like, oh, sadness, thank you so much for letting me know that that was really important to me. And I'm losing it, or however sadness shows up. Anger then becomes an intuitive bridge to, whoa, somebody is totally stepping on my boundaries. That's probably a good thing to know, that when anger comes up and you're in a healthy EQ state, you say like, I don't have to respond to that anger, but I need to know, like, my body's having this response of anger. Somebody's encroaching on my boundaries. I need to set up a boundary or I need to speak up for myself. My other favorite emotion as a diagnostic, this one's weird, is disgust. Disgust actually has a very important intuitive concept to it. And disgust is managed by something in your brain called insula, which are all these receptors all over your mind and brain. When insula are firing, it's telling you, ew, disgusting, that thing is not for you. And typically we would associate that with you smell some rotten food. Your brain goes, that's disgusting. Ew, disgust, right? Don't eat the rotten food. That's what the insula in your brain is attempting to do for you. Disgust as an emotion, let's say you're going about your day and then you get this sense of disgust towards, I don't know, an activity you're going to do later. Same thing, insula's firing in your brain and saying, hey, that thing, ew, that's not for you. It's trying to redirect you against a potential something that would not be good for you. And so at that point, disgust intuitively becomes quite useful. Let's not talk about all the heavy emotions. Happiness as an intuitive bridge is also quite useful because when you're happy and you're enthusiastic, that is literally your intuitive EQ telling you you're on the right path. It's directionally pointing you towards your potential. Conversely, when you're super frustrated or things feel like they're not working out for you, you're being intuitively guided, you're off the path of your potential. So intuitively, following the key emotion of happiness, can that lead you towards your potential? Oh yeah, absolutely. But again, to get to this level of intuitive connection with your emotions requires you got to process all the ones you've been avoiding first.
Okay, so how then do you teach people to tell the difference between true intuitive guidance and mental noise?
Yeah. Intuition, under the premise that it is the voice of truth within you, is always going to speak the truth to you. And intuition speaking within you is always going to be kind and helpful to you. It's never going to be unkind and it's never going to be not helpful. It's going to speak to you. And even if that truth that you get is uncomfortable, it's still the truth. So why I say these things in this framework is that people have gotten really good at listening to their critical inner voice, which is unkind, unhelpful, quite mean sometimes, and leads us through threats and judgments. And people have gotten really good at listening to that voice. So the voice of intuition inside, again, is always kind, always helpful, and is always going to speak the truth to you, even if it's an uncomfortable truth.
Okay, so would you say then, if we take that down one level, is that the intuition will always be for your embetterment? It will always have growth associated with it instead of the other one, which tends to be more, I would say, the outcomes may not necessarily be positive or in your best favor. Is that a simplified way to look at it?
I think so. And I would also add that the intuitive voice is going to lead you into growth and expansion, and the critical inner voice is going to lead you into contraction, shrinking.
So even if we don't like what is being said, we then have to get present to the fact, well, we have to ask ourselves, is this for my growth and expansion, or is this really going to hinder me and stagnate me? So then that's another conversation there, because, you know, I've had people, and even like myself in my journey, it was kind of like, which one is it really that, you know, I should be listening to? But for me, mine is very short phrases, very few words, very loud, and very, very specific. So there's no sort of like story attached to it. Like one was to start this podcast. I got woken up out of my sleep, 3:00 in the morning, said 2 words, do podcast. It said it 3 times, very loud voice in my head that the entire world, if they were in my head, would be deafened because it was that loud. So for me, it is always, it's almost like, in my case, it's a command. It's an imperative. Do this, no more than 3 words. It's always do podcasts or, mostly 2 to 3 words. Always an action in my case, always an action. I guess maybe because I'm a bit stubborn and maybe because as a boy, I had to be told what to do. And I guess, I kind of almost got at listening to instructions. And I guess there's one of the reasons why I'm in good shape, because if you tell me the blueprint, I'm just going to follow it. So, you know what I mean? I guess that is just my personality. But for me, it's just short phrases, no more than 3 words. It's an imperative, it's a command, it's do this or do that all the time.
That's wonderful. I love hearing how your intuition shows up for you. And there's going to be quite a few variances for people individually. It will show up precisely as that person needs to hear it. So for you, it's precise, it's concise, it's loud, it's very direct, it speaks few words, and beyond a shadow of a doubt, that's the deepest part of your own wisdom trying to reach you. You know the difference between that voice and every other voice in your head. That's well done. That's exactly what we should all strive to cultivate. And I would say that in time, the more you engage with your intuition, the more it speaks to you fluidly and as you would like it to. It's I hesitate to say that you're kind of training it like your own AI model, because that would be wildly inaccurate, that AI and intuition. And in fact, this is kind of an interesting point about the difference between AI and intuition, is that AI can only draw on a set amount of data. So no matter how complex AI gets, it's always going to draw upon a confined set of information. By definition, AI cannot draw from outside the data set. You can, because you're intuitive. Intuition is drawing outside the data set, kind of a thing, but I digress. I just find that's an interesting difference. So when people are forming their relationship to their intuition, it's, you recognize the voice or the nudge or the feeling or the vision or the imaging. Everybody's mind works a little bit different. We all like to receive and process information differently. So for you, it's a voice. For me, it's a voice. For others, I've seen that it's, they get a vision or an image in their mind that just flashes across. And for some other people, I have this one friend, it's amazing. When her intuition comes in, it's a full body wave of her feeling good. And to be honest, it almost looks orgasmic for her. Like she's just in ecstasy for this moment. She's like, I'm getting an intuition. It's so wonderful. And it's that's awesome that's the way that hers reaches her. So to just demystify this a little bit further is that everybody has some sort of mechanism that is designed to nudge and speak to them in some way. It just depends on the individual and how that shows up.
Yeah, and just to, I guess to say, build on what you were saying just now, I do get that kind of flow, but mostly in 2 areas, meditation and psychedelics. When I take psychedelics, that voice becomes a full-blown conversation. Same way as in meditation. And because I just came back from an ayahuasca retreat and I had a really interesting conversation with the voice, and it told me something. And I said to him, well, how do I know this is real? Or how do I know you're real? And he replied that it said to me was, what is real? Right? And it made me think, because in reality, what we think is reality is just a spectrum of light that is so small, that is so narrow, that you have to ask yourself, is it really, really real what we're seeing here? And then it led a whole different conversation with the voice. So then it's like, okay, all right, I'll just do what you say to do then, So it was that sort of flow that you were talking about, but I get it only in meditative states or with psychedelics. But in my, I would say, awakened state, like now, a voice, a command, and that's it.
Yeah. And I would say that it's very likely going to continue to develop over time. You know, one thing in training intuition is the willingness to defer to it, the willingness to ask it questions. So when people are first starting off on their intuitive journey with me, I encourage them to ask this or that type of questions. Hey, intuition, do I want a cup of coffee or a cup of tea? Do I want to take, this route to work or that route to work? Do I want to wear the color red or the color purple today? And you just start asking these low barrier kind of questions. And whatever your intuition comes up with, you have the choice whether or not to follow it. Your intuition's not going to be mad at you if you don't follow what it has to say. That's going back to that intuition's always true, helpful, and kind. So if there's a voice in your head that's like, you didn't listen to your intuition, you're going to have a bad day. That's not intuition. That's critical inner voice doing something weird. So in this, when you ask your inner wisdom, just subtle, just little decisions, what you'll find is that you're constantly put on the most optimized path for that day. Do I take this route to work or that route? And it goes, take that route today. And you're like, that's weird. I never take that route. But you choose to listen to it. You take that route and lo and behold, you avoided an accident. Neat intuition. What else can you do? Kind of a thing. And that's where people, the journey really begins, is when you trust the information that's coming through and you see the results. But I always advise people, at first, you're learning to trust it. This is the process of discernment. We're not asking anybody to follow something blindly. I would never ask that of somebody. So it's trust and verify. Maybe create an intuition journal. Intuition said to do this today. I chose to do it. Here was the outcome. Intuition said to do that today. I chose not to do it. Here was the outcome. And so I ask people, just become a scientist. Like, prove it to yourself that this is real and that you can trust it.
Okay, so let's delve into masculine and feminine intuition. Mm-hmm. So you've said men and women reclaim their intuitive selves in distinct ways. How do these differences show up emotionally or energetically?
Yeah, I would say that men are more connected to primal instinctual awareness than women are. That's just been my observation over time, in that men seem to have this connection to an instinct that's like gut level. And you can hear it when a man says, I trusted my gut. What's interesting about trusting gut level primal instinctual intuition is that it generally knows two words, yes and no, and That's it. It's not going to speak in language. It's not going to speak in like big long sentences. It's just going to go, do you want the steak tonight? To be primal. And the gut goes, and it's like, okay, great. That's your intuition talking to you. I perceive that women have, you've heard that women's intuition kind of a thing.
Yes.
Why women have more of a connection to the intuition that's narrative form and maybe longer explanations. Women tend to be pretty verbal emotionally.
A little bit, yes.
A little bit. We're wired that way. So in this, when a woman's intuition comes in, it is going to work through her emotions. It is going to weave itself into a very verbal, narrative, conversational thing. But the thing that women intuitively need to realize is that it is very tough at first to discern, is this my intuition creating this narrative based in truth and based in neutrality? Or are these my emotions taking over this thing and now I think it's my intuition? So I would say that men and women have two different opportunities to develop their intuition. For women, it's discernment of this or that. Is this my emotional intuition speaking to me from a place of wisdom and discernment, or am I just emotionally charged by this situation? And for men, the opportunity is to develop that language a little bit beyond just the primal and to get it to more of a drawn out place for them, I would say.
You know, I loved that analogy of because look, as a man, while I can't represent all men, I think most men will concur where that is spot on. It is like, do you want something to eat? Yes or no? Do you want to go out? Yes or no? Do you like me? Yes or no? It's that simple. Now, the nuance I find comes is when men are dealing with men, there's absolute blunt truth. There's feedback. There is, I'm just going to tell you how it is. But then when you have relationships, whether it's platonic, sexual, or business with females, that doesn't really work a lot. And it creates a big challenge. And one of the things that I have been saying to myself and to men as well is that one of the traits we're going to have to develop is more patience, because I think that unless a woman is really down that journey where she's able to say, okay, is this my emotions here just acting up? Is this true or not? Then men have to practice a lot more patience, because it would take, in my experience, sometimes 7 times of explaining something before it's like, okay. So I tend to, now I've worked on having more patience, and all the guys that I coach, I say, look, this is a trait you're going to have and just accept, right? And when you accept that it's difficult for them, the element of wanting to be right is removed, where it's just like, okay, I know you're not going to get it, and that's fine. I'll just keep repeating it, and then maybe one day you get it. And if you never get it, that's still fine, but it's not going to affect me. And that is how I have been able to manage some of the topics and conversations, because the is spot on. And then on the flip side, what I have been learning in my journey now is that female intuition is becoming more present in my life now, where because I'm so much in order and structure, when things don't work out and I have to adapt, in the beginning, I go into the tizzy and I'm like, flipping that, and then I'm like, all right, okay, what is this trying to show me? What is an opportunity there? What can I do differently and stuff? So I think there's an opportunity for both women and men to sort of like learn a little bit about each other's way of thinking. And that's one of the reasons for, having these types of conversations, because I think that I'll be categorically honest, where I think a lot of men feel that their voices or their opinions are irrelevant. I think that whenever we have something to say, we just don't say it because of the emotional verbiage that gets put at us. And I think it's an opportunity for women to listen to our side in a way where it's like, actually, we do have an opinion. We are here. Hey, we're still here, right? So I'm glad that you were able to bring a little bit of nuance. And I think if girls understand that we're so primal, is or then they can realize, okay, he's just basic, have a little bit of empathy for him, he's just a basic, specimen, right?
Fascinating. You are describing a discussion that happens in my household on the regular. My husband says it all the time, honey, I'm basic. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're the most complex creature I've ever met in my entire life. And it's literally, it almost starts to come into, has less to do with men versus women. I would argue it has more to do with left brain versus right brain. Truly. That women, in that regard, the emotional woman, the woman who's very in touch with her feelings, we want sensitive women in our society. We do. Because sensitive women can pick up on things much more precisely then we might realize we can sense things coming at a far off distance. Like if there's going to be a problem in a relationship, the woman is tuned into that problem way more, or way before the man is going to be tuned into the problem. And so when a woman brings a grievance to the relationship and she's like, hey, this is a problem, it's her level of sensitivity that's sensing from a far off distance that if we don't take care of this now, this is going to become a big problem. Or men in their brains, kind of left brain, very analytical, structured, logical, foundational, they're out there breaking things apart to understand them better and build from that. Well, he's not really tracking on the emotional context of a relationship or a situation at all. He's concerned with how things work. And so in that way, when the woman comes in and says, hey, this has the potential to be a problem, sure, it might be annoying. I get it. Like, what are you talking about? There is no problem. You're always seeing problems where there are no problems. Totally understand that argument and that pushback. But because of the woman's sensitivity, she's sensing something that needs to be addressed before it turns into something bigger and therefore much more unwieldy. So that is how I think that the women and men in this regard can really learn to work with one another and sort of see that we can't do it without the other one.
It's true. It's true.
We're going to learn.
You know, right? I am very tempted to say that if women really understood how basic men are, and how just simpletons we are, and I say that, and men are not going to get disrespected by saying we're simpletons and we're basic, because how should we put it? It is, I don't want to use the word program, but I would say is that if women understood how men really, really tick, I mean, like on a basic primal level of how we tick, women can get the best out of men, because what men are really good at is execution and doing, and then having someone to, I don't want to say validate, but when you do something good, it's like, great job, well done, Todd. We're like, really? Great. Okay, I can just do more of that. So this is what you want. So if you were able to be very clear in your communication, well, okay, this is how men work and they take. Men will go there and work hard and become exemplary examples out there, because they know they have that sort of like balance where it's like, hey, did you see that person there? I don't really trust that person. That person may want to have not your best interest at heart. You know what? That person may try to steal you out of money, this and that. So this is really superpower of the woman now, can help be the rudder on the ship. Because I think the man is like the ship, tears through the water, strong, powerful, brute force. But then the woman is like the rudder, is just a little bit of guidance here and there. We both need each other, but right now where we are, the ship thinks that he doesn't need the rudder, and the rudder thinks that it's the ship. And without the ship, the rudder can't move. So we have this sort of like dichotomy where is a self-defeating sort of like mentality that we have. And I think that if women did their part to understand how men think, because we are so basic and so simple, I think that we would have a massive shift in the dynamics between men and women in relationships, because men just want to go there and work hard and just provide and be good men, that most men. But when we have to deal with all the emotional stuff, we kind of like get out of our comfort zone, which actually brings me on to my next question. So for men, what are the main cultural blocks that keep them from trusting intuition, and how can they start to dismantle them?
Yeah, I think we're touching on that subject a little bit, in that it requires a bit more of a relationship with the emotional side of things. It requires left brain and right brain integration so that you can reach the subconscious mind. That doesn't happen without that integration. And so we're asking the left brain to come into a little bit more of the right brain's territory. We're asking the masculine to come a little bit more into the feminine territory to decide, like, all right, what's this emotions thing all about? And we've said what the benefits are of that is when you tap into some of the unprocessed emotions. And for most men that I come across in my work, It's frustration, which is anger turned inward, fear, and anger. So frustration, anger, and fear. When men reconcile their relationship to those emotions, they become more courageous. They become definitely more intuitive. Their primal language of versus becomes a little more refined, and they start getting, intuitive insights that are, maybe like yours, a few more words than just one. But in that, they start to develop a little bit more of a language for some of the really amazing emotions that are out there too. Joy, personal satisfaction, fulfillment, contentment, meaning. And we're in a bit of a meaning crisis right now because we've, there's probably a lot of reasons for that. And I don't want to diagnose too much of the world's ills in just a couple of hours. But what I would say is it is up to each of us individually to define our own sense of meaning, contentment, satisfaction, and fulfillment. And we do that by becoming aware of what blocks that, namely frustrations, fears, doubts, and those constructs over our mind.
So it's very interesting what you said just now, because from a man's point of view, and even though I can't speak from all men, most men, we have this similar situation where if we choose to be a little bit emotional or vulnerable with a woman, most of the time, again, I'm not going to say all women, but the majority of women tend to take that as weakness, so they end up losing sexual attraction for the man. So what happens now is that men stop listening to what women say and only focus on how women respond. So what happens then is that men stop telling women things, stop telling them the truth, because they respond to the truth and the feedback badly. So what advice then would you give for women that to allow men to step into that without the repercussion of punishment? Because in my case, I remember specifically, I chose one time to be a little vulnerable with a woman. I literally never heard from her again. Yeah. And most men, that when they listen to women, we want vulnerable men, when they attempt to be vulnerable, they lose sexual attraction and they're punished heavily. And a lot of the times the women just leave because they want that pure, unadulterated, alpha masculine energy. Now, I do think that there are flaws with being that pure alpha energy, because there's the nuance that's missing in terms of the feminine intuition, the emotional aspect. So what advice would you give to women to help them to help us? Because men, because we're problem solvers, we react according to how women act to us. So we will stop telling the truth, and we will stop divulging emotions, and we'll just stop being vulnerable because of the punishment we receive. So what was your advice to women?
That's an excellent question. To my fellow women out there, emotions make terrible storytellers. Emotions create some very interesting narratives in our head. And so when a woman is emotionally, she hasn't learned her emotional intelligence quite yet, she lets those emotions kind of run roughshod over her consciousness. So let's say she's sensing the emotion of fear. Well, instead of recognizing in her brain, this is fear talking, she thinks it's her inner narrative. She thinks that everything that's going on in her brain is the truth, and therefore is starting to see shadow monsters everywhere, kind of a thing. And so it is the woman's responsibility, or I would say anybody who's predominantly identified with right brain thinking, very emotional type of thinking, it is totally necessary to discern, this is the emotion of fear talking in my head. This is the emotion of disgust talking in my head. This is the emotion of confusion talking in my head. And start to learn what each and every one of those emotions sounds like. Because if left unchecked, the woman or the right brain person stops realizing that these are emotions and emotional overwhelm running the show and running their reality and running their perception. So I would say you get this man who means well, and he shares something that he's super scared of. And he shares it with empathy and vulnerability, and he shares it with a woman who has not reconciled her own relationship to fear. She's going to take that fear that she heard from him, and it's going to get bigger in her mind because she hasn't reconciled. That's his fear. That doesn't have to be my fear as well. There's this thing that I think that women might be really good at. It's the over empathy. Let's say that someone around them is experiencing this really big emotion of fear, and she can't tell the difference. Is that his fear? Is that my fear? Now it's both of our fears. And oh, shoot, now we're both entrenched in some really, really deep fears. So emotional intelligence cuts both ways for men and women. Men, my suggestion, come a little bit over to the side to start expressing and feeling those emotions, and you'll get some empathy with when your woman is scared, when your woman is angry. That's what it looks like. You have those emotions too. And when the woman, when you're overwhelmed and you're afraid and all of those things, learn how to manage those emotions, learn how to manage your fears and manage your angers without projecting them all over everybody around you and sort of blaming them for how you feel inside. So I would ask to kind of summarize this dichotomy between men and women. We got to meet each other a bit more in the middle. And I think, seriously, if we were to do this on a more societal level, I think we'd be really onto something, because we've experimented for the last 20 years what division looks like, tearing things apart. So
It's very true.
That would be my hope and my wish for people who are learning not only their left brain and their right brain, but for men who predominantly are in their left brain and women who are predominantly in their right. There's things we can learn from both hemispheres to balance ourselves out. And the added benefit of all of that opportunity is once you do that work, you become more intuitive. You learn to trust the inner wisdom that you hear within yourself, and you start getting really good answers how to solve the most complex things in your life.
Yeah, intuition is almost I would say the feminine spirit. It's the guide. It's the pistis sophia, the wisdom and faith. The Zoe, the Barbello. So very, very interesting. So for women, where does self-doubt sabotage intuitive confidence, and how do you help rebuild that trust?
Yeah, self-doubt. It's such a gnarly one, especially for women. And I do, a lot of my practice is based in coaching women. Self-doubt's just, man, it's insidious, isn't it? Like, it just takes
Very.
the best parts of us and just corrodes them until, I myself and other women that I've coached, till you just can't even get out of bed anymore. And that self-doubt stuff is just, it's something to be recognized as that is not true, it is not helpful, and it is not kind. Please don't listen to it. But again, to get to that level of metacognition requires some outside help. And metacognition means thinking about thinking. So if we were to start thinking about self-doubt, is it a helpful voice? Should we be listening to it? Or is there another voice intuitively that guides more gently with greater access to truth than anything else? And what's interesting about doubt is that in my initial research early on in this, I identified that there are three main blockers to intuition: fear, doubt, and control. Fear is an emotion. Doubt is a construct. Control is a construct. So whenever we're super fearful about something, the mind starts creating thoughts to try to deal with that fear. And sometimes those thoughts turn into self-doubt and self-criticism and just self-annihilation. We tear ourselves up inside. And it's all out of this mindset to try to control what we can around us. All three of those constructs, though, are basically the antithesis or the opposite of the voice of truth within us. So for anybody who's walking an intuitive journey, you've got to understand and reconcile your relationship to fear and doubt and control. Control, that one's tough for women. It really is. I know a lot of myself. I'm a reforming type A woman who's trying very, very hard to surrender control every given circumstance, because I think I know better sometimes, but sometimes I don't. And so in that, when we realize and we can just admit to ourselves, yeah, I can be controlling. Yeah, I can be totally consumed with self-doubt and doubt everything in my life, which is not good for me. And also I can be really fearful. And if you can honestly look in the mirror and say those things to yourself, they start to lose their power over your brain. And all it takes is just the admission of, I don't want to be led by doubt. I don't want to be led by fear. And I don't want to try and control everything around me. And just based on that, more of our intuitive self starts to come in and relax into our brain. And life just gets different after that.
Okay. So when masculine and feminine intuitive styles meet, whether in relationships, teams, or families, how can understanding that polarity heal communication and deepen intimacy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because what happens if your intuition's telling you something different than my intuition's telling me? What do we do then? And that is going to take us back to emotional intelligence. It's honoring each other with that. I got into a situation quite recently where I tend to come across as a pretty strong personality, and I definitely know where I'm going, and I have a very direct take on things. So when my intuition says go that way, I'm like, done, and I will. But there was a situation where somebody that I love very much got an intuitive read on something, and I didn't hear it. I just kind of was like, nope, my intuition says to go this way. Well, it turns out my friend was right. And I kind of analyzed that for a second of like, how did I not pick up on that? How did I just kind of steamroll over what they were saying? And my intuition led. And it was actually a bit of a simple answer. Had I just kind of checked in one more time with my own intuition, like, hey, she heard something different than I heard, and discerning it from that, then I would have come into agreement with the situation. But at that point, I was an island. So I think in terms of small dynamics and groups, if we're all being led by intuition, then the next step is we get to negotiate what we're each sensing. And everybody's sense or feeling on the situation and environment is valid. We have to work together to negotiate which direction we're going to go from there. So I think in this, it just requires a bit more of maturity in our emotional and intuitive discernment. Hey, if you got a different read than me, let's hear it. Perhaps both of our intuitions paired together are going to create a better situation than them being separate.
Okay, so basically, I guess if I were to put that in a very simplified version, is basically just listening to each other's point of view, because and listening to a sense of like trying to really get what they're saying, instead of just it going through one ear and coming through the next, to say, okay, what is your real take on it? What are you feeling with this point of view and stuff like? Because I did a show that hasn't come out yet, but this guy, he basically made a career out of listening. It's a very, very interesting conversation he had. And he said that in his listening, he would put himself in the situation of the person, that he would feel the emotions of the person when they were expressing a particular point of view. And he said that allowed him to really be able to, because he's a psychotherapist, to diagnose exactly the direction the patient should go in. So when that show comes out, that's going to be very, very interesting, where I think that what you're talking about is pretty much that, where like all the intuitions are valid, but okay, let me see if I can feel where you're coming from, and then I can build a bit of a bridge where there might be some nuance there that you've missed, and then my nuance can come and say, hey, what about this? And then, okay. And then we can join together instead of trying to be adversarial in our approaches, a bit more empathetic, but more than empathetic, but listening on that deep level to get the where the person's coming from.
Totally. And also to add to that, it's kind of like, well, what makes that different than each other just listening to our own opinions. You know, in the example of my friend, it was that her opinion that was just leading her, and I didn't listen to her opinion, kind of a thing. And what we're talking about, the difference between being led by opinions and being led by unprocessed emotions and being led by things that are maybe critical inner voices inside of us versus being led by our intuitive selves, is we're recognizing the sovereignty of the individual in front of us. We're recognizing that the spirit of truth in that person spoke to them and gave them this viewpoint, and that is just as much valid as the sovereignty that I have within myself. And so it's so important that we recognize that each of us has the potential to be led by the spirit of truth within us. And I do believe in one truth, but I also believe that it's going to show up for us and speak to us in different ways at different moments. And it's up to us to really listen. Exactly as you said, like, what is that truth to you right now? I care about it. I want to know about it. I want to feel it the way you feel it. And my goodness, if we did this, what would our relationships look like? What would our society and our communities look like? I mean, that is a future I would be proud to live in.
I think we'd have an insane transformation of our society, to be honest with you. So guys, we can take a very short break here to say, if you're feeling that spark inside, that sense that there's more intelligence within you, that what the world has taught you, pause this for a second, hit share, tag a friend who needs to hear this message, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on a podcast platform, leave us a 5-star review, as that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. Follow us on Instagram at Adriano_246 or at the Conscious Man 7 podcast, and Todd Cave on Facebook to see what we get up to on the daily. We're about to go even deeper into intuition and why reclaiming it might just change everything. So let's talk a little bit about tuning into the signal. So what are the most subtle signals people miss every day that their intuition is trying to communicate?
That they're being led by fear. That most of us, if we've not challenged the voice of fear in our heads, it's very, very likely that we're being led by the emotion of fear in some way. And so for those that are truly interested in going very, very deep with their intuitive selves, it requires a bit of courage and a bit of bravery to say, okay, fear, I'm going to turn around. I'm going to look you right in the face. What do you got? And whatever that fear comes up with, you just listen to it. You just observe it. It will not overtake you. That's the thing that most people miss, is that the reason why we don't turn around and look at that fear square in the eye is because we think that it's somehow bigger and meaner and scarier. And it doesn't have to be. When you realize that it's just an emotion, and it's just an emotion that's come with a few narratives and stories in your head, when you turn around and face it, it loses its power. And again, when you think of it like a toddler running around, then it becomes almost comical. Like, all right, big, scary toddler, what are you afraid of? And the fears, if we were all do this and compare notes, be like, well, I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of going broke. I'm afraid of societal collapse. I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid that my partner doesn't like me anymore. I'm afraid of this, whatever. We share the same fears. Like, so it provides this opportunity that we can all be like, yeah, fear is kind of nasty, but doesn't have to run the show. After that, we become a lot more intuitive and a lot more wise, because that thing is not running us from behind the scenes.
You know, what you said just now, I think is fascinating and true all at the same time, because people seem to think that we're very different from each other, but we pretty much have the same fears, just some variations of it. And I think that for an entrepreneur, we always fear going broke, because that is just a certain, how should I say it? That's just a certain thing that's instilled because you have no support system. There's no one to depend on. You don't have a job paying you every month. So there's always that fear. Then again, we talk about relationships. Does she love me? Does he love me? Both men and women have those same kind of fears, which I think is more false evidence appearing real than anything else. And then the stories that we create in our head, which also come from fear and doubt. And a lot of the time, those stories aren't even real, right? They're just things that we've told ourselves to make us feel good, or maybe we're just addicted to the emotion that we get. So that sort of like, I don't think it's dopamine, but is the hormone that's released. You become addicted to it. So we're almost like drug addicts because we're just chasing that hit of sadness, depression, anger, fear, whatever. And, and we're all the same basically. And if we were to share notes, I think that's actually quite interesting. If we were to share notes as with each other, I think we would start to realize, oh, shucks, we are actually really the same. We are no different,
Agreed. And the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Very wise words, because when you think of what fear does to the brain, it's worth taking a closer look at. Fear run by the amygdala, and when the amygdala is firing, our prefrontal cortex and executive function is diminished. So when we're operating from a fearful state, we're actually using less of our brain to process our reality. We're way more reactive. So if someone wants to improve their strategic thinking and improve their brain's capacity, you gotta work with the amygdala and get that thing to chill out so that you get more of your brain's higher order processing available to you.
Okay, so what's your transformative ritual or tool for quieting mental chatter and hearing that deeper voice?
It's so simple. So what I would encourage everyone to do, if they're interested in this, it's called the 90-30-30 exercise. You set a timer for 90 seconds and you choose an emotion that's kind of loud right now. And what's interesting is that in the entire human experience, all of the emotions that we can feel as humans, they boil down to just 6. And that's happy, angry, sad, fearful, surprised, or disgusted. So in this exercise for 90 seconds, pick one of those emotions that feels kind of loud. If you don't know where to start with fear. For 90 seconds, give fear in your brain a microphone and just say whatever you want. I'm listening. And you just let it rant. After the 90 seconds, you set another timer for 30 seconds and you choose an emotion you want to feel, maybe for the rest of the day, probably from the happiness camp. Confident, inspired, proud, elated, accepted, whatever it is that you want to feel that day. And you focus on the feeling of that emotion for 30 seconds. What does that emotion feel like in your body? What's interesting is that people have sometimes forgotten what happiness feels like. And so when they say, oh, that's what happiness feels like, my blood pressure goes down, my nervous system isn't firing rapidly anymore, I can think more clearly. In fact, I'm not really thinking at all. I'm just happy. The body remembers. All that from 30 seconds. The last 30 seconds of this exercise is to visualize you walking through the rest of the day, doing all the things that you got to do that day, answering your emails, answering the phone, hanging out with your kids, saying hi to your partner. You imagine all of those activities with the feeling that you chose going with you. So if you chose happiness, you imagine your whole day feeling happy while you do it. The reason for this part of the exercise is that you're priming the brain. Whatever the brain can visualize or imagine, it can create. So you're priming it for a certain feeling for the rest of the day. So to recap this, 90-30-30. 90 seconds spent with an emotion you don't prefer. 30 seconds spent with an emotion you do prefer. 30 seconds spent visualizing you doing your day with that emotion that you prefer. Basically training your brain to be emotionally balanced, a lot more wise and regulated, and intuition will start to sneak its way in the more you practice this exercise.
That's a really, really cool set of tools that you've given us. And I hope that people will rewind that and listen to it, screen record it or voice record it, whatever, and practice it, because you're basically starting off from where you don't want to be and then going to where you want to be and reaffirming that in the last 30 seconds. So you basically set yourself up for daily, basically, And with repetition, it becomes a lot easier to do. And I tell this to my clients where, like, when you overcome fear once, it's not that in the future you will not have fears, but the time it took to overcome fear again is reduced. And that reduction is progress. And a lot of the time, people, when they're, working on themselves, they're not able to decipher that actually I am actually improving, because they're thinking, well, I still have this fear of this and that. But if it took you 3 days to recover and now it takes you 2 days, that's a win. So I always say to my clients, stack your wins, keep records of it. Cha-ching, stack your wins. So if in a couple of months' time, it takes you 1 day, cha-ching, that's another win. Stack your wins. And what happens that the time becomes shorter and shorter and shorter, where you could get into a state where it's just minutes and you're like, okay, I'm done with that. Next, and we move on. So, this is why you always say to people, it's a refinement process. And I prefer to use that in the dark night of the soul, because the refinement process is continual and the flame keeps getting hotter and hotter, and you keep getting more and more purified. And this is where the mastery of self comes in, right?
Right. And that is such a great example of that. I loved how you conceptualized the refinement of fear. That fear is never really going to go away. And because on its basis levels, it is useful to you. It's telling you to exercise caution. That fear is a diagnostic tool, but fear left unchecked and burning freely can burn a lot of things to the ground. So,
facts.
Yeah, at this point, to turn and face your fears, no matter what it's saying to you, and then you get to choose through your agency, through your sovereignty, do I want to follow that? Do I want to believe that or not? That is the keys to wisdom right there.
Okay. And you've said doing more isn't progress, doing what's aligned is. How do we practically apply that to decision making?
Intuitive decision making is interesting. When you get into the habit of checking in with the spirit of truth within you and saying, hey, is this decision strategic? Is this my next best step? And your intuition says, yes, that is your next best step. You've basically cut out all of the noise that working through grind and hustle and, over experimentation with too many options, which creates a lot of anxiety and trying to move through all of that chaos. None of that is just strategic as you checking in with yourself. Say, intuition, what is my next best step? Pause. And you wait for a word, an image, or a nudge, depending on how your intuition works. So for you, Todd, intuition, what is my next best step? And it comes through with a couple of words. That is your most strategic next move. Had you not asked your intuition, you might have been like, well, I don't know what my next best move is. And sometimes experimentation is wonderful, and sometimes you will be led into that. But by and large, people don't check in with themselves, and they're led by some pressure or some conditioned belief or some limiting belief, which always creates extra work. So I'm all about efficiency. Just get used to tuning in, even if you're tuning in with your gut and it's or an it's still the next best step, and it's still going to be the most strategic one for you.
I really love that. It literally, most men that listening to this are going to say, yep, she nailed it. She got it. We're simpletons, man. This is literally how we think. Yes or no. We don't do too much. I'm not sure. It's too woolly for us, Yeah. So you believe intuition will define the leaders of tomorrow. What will intuitive leadership look like in the next decade?
Yeah, I would follow an intuitive leader to the ends of the earth and back, because in order to get to intuition, that this individual has had to wrestle their toughest emotions. They've had to learn emotional intelligence. They've had to balance out their left brain and their right brain. They test and they verify their discernment, and they're empathetic too. So I believe that intuitive leadership is needed now more than ever in every single sector across society, because we need really smart people who are in tune with empathy, emotional intelligence, and wisdom and discernment to solve some really big issues that we're facing as a collective. And also, intuitive leadership is capable of seeing the bigger picture. When we're being led by fear and we don't discern our own thoughts, we're being led with blinders on, almost. And so when someone is intuitive, they've gone through the journey, they've met themselves, and they listen to the spirit of truth within them, they're leading. In the age of AI, which we cannot put that genie back in that bottle, we are full steam ahead into a very AI and massively upgraded technological and innovation future. We need to retain that which is truly human, and that is intuition. Because again, AI will never be able to replicate intuition. It's not possible because for many reasons that I probably shouldn't get into, it's a longer explanation. But in that, we need to maintain our humanity, which is intuition and emotional intelligence. So intuitive leadership, I think, will keep us on the straight and narrow, balancing some extremely powerful tools like AI that are coming out, and will keep us on a pathway to a future that is awesome rather than the ones we see like in the movies, like The Matrix and The Terminator or whatever.
Very, very dystopian. I mean, we're getting to a point now where, and one of the reasons why I have started to talk about the social dynamics between men and women a lot is that even that is going to be challenged now because we're going to have the android robots. I call them android robots, but they're basically going to be humanoid robots that you can have sex with, and you can put the AI inside that body. So that's why I call them androids, because I used to watch Dragon Ball Z and I'm a kid of the 80s. So, and one of the reasons why I talk frequently now about the social dynamics between men and women is that those androids are going to put further stress on the dynamics between the two sexes. And there's going to be a lot of, how should I say, a lot of dystopian sort of like future coming out of that, because we're not even going to procreate. We're not even going to have, men are just going to not become men. Women will just be just pushed to the side. There'll be no family. There'll be no nothing. And, you know, the leadership has to have a balance between, you know, embracing a technological era, but still having a very human focus, you know, on protecting the life source of humanity, which is the social dynamics between men and women, procreation, having family, you know, like having purpose, you know. Yeah. So I do agree with you that there's some very big questions that the leaders need to ask. So how can intuition reshape corporate culture, leadership training, and even education systems?
That's a big question. And I think it's interesting to see something as individually based as intuition. You know, your intuition speaks to you differently than mine. It's going to have different information. But like in the example before, our collective intuitions have the potential to create brilliance. Because that's the thing we haven't quite talked about yet, is that when you have access to your intuition and your intuition bridges into your subconscious mind, accessing trillions of bits of data, that is experience tenfold. That's exponential experience that you're drawing from. That makes us really intelligent. And I would love to find a partner with somebody who works at a university ready to do a research project on, once somebody becomes intuitive, does their IQ increase? I don't know if that's possible, but I do know that once someone is intuitive, they've bridged into the most creative and intelligent part of themselves, that higher order thinking. So in terms of corporations and infrastructure and schools, that means that everybody's moving from the highest point of their inspiration and the highest point of their brilliance. That's pretty cool. That means that we would be building things quite advanced that would also take into consideration the human element of things. Again, because you can't extricate intuition from emotional intelligence. That's not possible. So in all of this, we would inspire these organizations and institutions to operate from a level that respects human brilliance and seeks to nurture it. That would be really cool. Those are institutions I'd love to be a part of, for sure.
Yeah, and you know what I can see happening is that eventually we're going to have some sort of like a breakaway society where the minds that are thinking like us, the ones that are there putting their foot in the ring to create change, I think inevitably what's going to happen is that we're all going to end up linking together. And through the collective intuition that you're talking about, all the skills and talents that we have are end up going to merge together. And this is why I'm very optimistic on the future, but very realistic on the path that we have to go through to get there, because that path is pain and suffering and despair. But at the end, I do think that, especially with the conversation that I have on my podcast, there's some brilliant minds out there that have a lot of skills and talents that basically, when put together, like the cartoon form, the arms form like Voltron, you know, it becomes indestructible, right? And I can see a Voltron type of a society where we're merging tech with science, intuition, spirituality, things like shamanism, psychedelics, sound healing, all of these things. I actually I've had a vision where I can see all of those modalities coming together, and kids are learning to use telepathy and telekinesis in the future, like levitation and stuff. But the thing is that to get there it requires this massive shift and then pain to go through. And, you know, all we are now is basically addicted to our phones and consuming large amounts of data and stuff. So in a world addicted to data, what's the risk of ignoring intuitive intelligence, both personally and collectively?
Yeah. I think about this one a lot. That, you know, when somebody's sitting there just scrolling images and videos of other people's wisdom every 1 to 8 seconds, the same rule applies. It's still information, bits of data going into your subconscious mind. And while I think that there's not really a risk as to how much the subconscious mind can hold, I think it's immense how much data we can actually consume and process. My question then becomes, are we meant to pull in so much information that may be other people's unprocessed emotions and feelings? Like if I watch the news for 10 minutes, and even though they're presenting the news in such a way that's, you know, neutral-esque, their tone is kind of monotone, and they're like, just the facts, this is what happened today. And yet the images that they're showing are chaos and death and destruction. And I'm just consuming that without really a filter into my subconscious mind. Is there a consequence to that? And, you know, by my premise of intuition draws upon the subconscious wisdom, is there a point when intuition could get tainted? I don't think so. But I think it's a good question worth asking. Should we be consuming so much raw data that is geared towards evoking a fear or frustration or anger type of emotion? Is that good for us? Is that good for our systems? I don't think it is. I think that our system was designed to take in inputs that are helpful and creative and true, and that we discern what is good for us and what isn't. So I ask people to exercise extreme caution when it comes to consuming mass amounts of data, and to run it through your discernment filters of saying, like, how do I feel after I scroll the internet for 15 minutes? How do I feel after consuming this person's content? How do I feel after, you know, playing in somebody else's reality for a while, that may be just screaming into the void, and they haven't processed their own fears and their own doubts and their own insecurities. Am I consuming that too? There's this concept called emotional contagion, which is other people's emotions. All emotions are highly contagious. And so you walk into a room where two people have been fighting, there's like this residue in the air. Like it's just kind of, you feel kind of off. Like, what is that? And so if we're all running around with just tons and tons of unprocessed emotions, is there a residue in certain environments? Are we soaking that up? Are we then having to reconcile with this? This is the quintessential problem with the empath, is that they're soaking up the undercurrents of their environments and then having to wrestle with emotions that are not theirs. So again, in all of this, I would say in data, consume wisely and continue to ask yourself in your intuition, is this in my best interest right now?
You know, another thing that I see, which is an interesting phenomenon, is that as people are sort of like coming into learning all the things we're talking about, they tend to consume a lot of the supposed positive information of reels and stuff. So what I find that is that they consume and consume and consume and consume, and they may share all of this information with friends and family and just be sharing. But I don't think there's a lot of doing in terms of the work itself, because, and I think it's a bit of a balance where I do agree that surrounding yourself with positive content and information has its purpose. But I also think that it can also be of the same effect as people that are just looking at cat videos and stuff that enrages them, because you can consume a certain amount to say, okay, well, yes, you know, my thoughts matter, and you know, me affirmations. This, you can consume that information and share it to all your friends, but what is the actual doing? Are you making actual changes? Are you confronting the same fears that the same video is telling you that you should do, or you're just becoming a consumer of the information to put a plaster on the fear that you're trying to run away from, that the content creator is telling you that you need to confront? So what I see a lot is that people are semi doing the work and not really doing the work fully. So there's not a lot of growth and change because of the overconsumption of the supposed positive content. Do you see anything similar as well?
I do. And also I think that the brain needs to be bored. Like if the brain just has this automatic, I'm just going to tap into social media and fill the void, the brain never gets a chance to experience boredom. When the brain experiences boredom, its next step is to alleviate that boredom, tends to map over into creativity. So the overconsumption of all of this data and all of these extra narratives keeps us locked into that, and that consumer mindset. It's kind of a far cry to get to that creator mindset without that unplugging that is necessary.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I see it all the time. People just over consuming on all the positive information, which is great, but it's almost like a trap that they're putting themselves into, where they're not doing, you know, they stop, stand still, you know, stagnation is the word I'm looking for, because they know of these things, but there's no taking action. And, you know, you still have to take some action, you know, I mean, thoughts do matter, but some degree of small action is required.
Well, being a keyboard warrior feels like action, doesn't it?
Well, it's true, it feels, but is it actually real action? That's the thing, right?
That is a question. And I think there's probably going to be degrees to that. For somebody who's not used to voicing their opinion, they put their opinion online and, you know, in that keyboard, I'm against this kind of thing, that was action for them. And that's good. Maybe that's a good place to start, but it shouldn't end there. You know, get out there and start developing your ideas. And, you know, screaming into the void is one thing, but I love where you're going with this, in that taking action is how we collectively participate in what comes next. Just yelling about what you don't like, I don't know, this doesn't feel like as productive as it could be, especially when we know that when somebody gets through their emotional resistance to something, brilliance is on the other side. That individual has a contribution that only they can fill. But just stopping at the, I'm just going to say what I say and unplug from the system, is that going to be enough to activate that potential within that individual? Maybe, maybe not. It's up to that person to decide, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, how can intuition make leadership more ethical, compassionate, and sustainable?
Yeah, the thing with ethics and compassion and empathy are all domains of emotional intelligence and good discernment and wisdom. And so again, that somebody who's met their intuitive self has had to walk themselves through their own EQ, their own wisdom. They've had to access the spirit of truth within them. They've had to discern what is right and what is wrong. And that just creates really grounded and wise leadership. And I truly believe that men and women who've stepped into their intuitive brilliance are designed to lead what comes next, because they know that, well, big problems are not solved in silos and that we're all going to have to work together, and we've got a lot of work to do. So I truly believe that intuitive leadership is the next domain of good leadership. And I hope that people take this call towards developing higher order thinking seriously, because I think we're almost behind the times and behind the curve. AI is going to keep accelerating way faster than we anticipate or realize. And so the time to learn our minds and learn how it works and learn what potential is within it was yesterday. But here we are.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. So you've said intuition frees us from fear-based decision-making and cultural conditioning. Why is that so threatening to existing systems?
Fear-based thinking is based in contraction and scarcity. And if it's interesting with scarcity mindset, there's this not enough, and I got to protect what's mine. It becomes very siloed. So with intuition and intuitive-based thinking, we're going to challenge what scarcity is, because intuition is very linked with abundance. And that doesn't mean that the resources are necessarily not in need of stewardship. We need very, very good stewardship over our resources. But it means that we act in such a way that is grounded wisdom rather than not enough and it's all going to disintegrate and we're all descending into chaos. Like, that's not intuitive leadership. That's fear-based leadership. So intuitive-based leadership is really leading us to a place where we understand how to manage things really well, despite its complexity.
Okay. And how do you respond to skeptics who call intuition woo-woo? And what evidence do you point to that is real, measurable intelligence?
Yeah, I get so frustrated with that commentary, and I'm not really sure why. I still haven't landed on why it bugs me so much, but it feels dismissive. Like, intuition is woo. It's like, well, okay, what is woo? Woo is, woo. It's like that hyper spiritual, stuff, and it should be discounted. And it's like, oh, we're discounting spirituality now? Like, there's a line of reasoning that I don't understand. But what I will say is that an intuitive journey, someone meeting their own intuition must learn how to discern it, trust, and verify. So in order to prove it to oneself, I actually ask people to get into their left brain scientist and do prove it to yourself. When you get that intuitive nudge to go this way instead of that way, and you went this way, how did it work out for you? Was it strategic? Was it your next best step? And therefore, it takes itself out of the realm of woo, and it puts it squarely in the realm of practical and almost logical in a roundabout way. That's my take on it. I can totally see where people get the supernatural vibe from it, and I think that's been largely based in popular culture and misnomers around certain spiritual segments that tout intuition as being that. My grandmother was a psychic, and she used her intuitive gifts to work with police departments to find lost kids and open cold cases. My grandmother told me that she talked to the dead in order to get her information. And for me, a little kid, I'm like, that's terrifying, and I don't want anything to do with that. But 1 and 1 equaled 2, and I heard intuition means you have to talk to dead people. And it took me decades to separate those two, and they're actually not really in the same camp at all. So I can appreciate where somebody would have the misconception that intuition is woo, but I assure you it is much more grounded and practical than that.
Yeah, it is. You find a lot of people, I guess maybe it's because science and spirituality and even things like mechanics and mathematics have been all separated into like separate fields. And I think that in reality, they're just one, it's one science, I would say, because I think that the spiritual is confirmed by the scientific, and then the actual quantum physics side of it is like the actual real raw data and the explanation of how it all works and stuff. And then mathematics is the thing that holds it all together, because without the mathematics, you won't be able to put on paper these complex things that are actually occurring. So I think that it's basically because of a separation of all of these things, which is really one thing. I guess you could call it consciousness. And I think that all those disciplines confirm consciousness. But because they're separated, I think everyone's in their silo and is all about, well, and they become like religions, to be honest with you. My religion is better than yours, and my God is better than yours. And then we fail to realize that, in fact, if we put all the information together, we actually have a better chance of figuring this whole thing called life out a bit more, because I think life is a massive mystery. And I think we're only now waking up to see what our real true potential and who we are, what we are, where we've come from, what we can truly achieve. And this is why I'm excited, but also real. Where, this progress only comes from a place of pain. And I don't think collectively we've experienced that pain as yet. I think it's still relatively easy. And I don't want those things to happen, but I'm just the person that's reporting on the information. And I'm saying, look, the information indicates that these things have to happen. We have a choice. We don't have to have it to happen, but here it is, guys. It's your choice. We choose as a collective where we want to go. We want to embrace AI to be our God, or we want to embrace AI to be a tool that can help us to actually improve things in life and to become more highly spiritual. And it can actually tell us the concepts about intuition, and then we can go away and put it in practice and then connect more to our spirit. So I see it as a tool, but it all depends on where the programmers are that are developing these large language models, So we'll get you on this one. If intuition is the bridge to our highest potential, what happens to humanity when we finally start trusting it?
Oh man, sky's the limit, I think. I I grew up watching all those sci-fi movies where super advanced, I grew up on Star Trek for sure, and advanced societies and how technology and wisdom all integrates into that. Or we could go the other direction and we start to see that we don't need as much technology to survive and thrive. It really is kind of up to us at this point. But what I do know is that intuition keeps us connected to our sovereignty, and it keeps us connected to agency. And agency is having the ability to choose. So ideally, with a widely intuitive society, we're free to choose a future that is really good. That is what I hope. And it values the prosperity and human potential, and it just encourages all of us to seek that potential and act upon it, be very brave and very courageous in our own respective adventures, and to create more life. I'm super rose-colored glasses in that one, and I hear you that maybe we have to go through more pain to get there. I certainly hope not. But I'm very hopeful that people hearing this and hearing the call towards their own adventure and their call towards their own intuition follow it, because it is the greatest adventure that anybody could ever embark on. The mystery of life is so much deeper than we realize.
I completely agree. And this is why one of my favorite sayings now is life is a massive mystery. And I like personally, since I've been doing this podcast, because I've had so many conversations now, it is actually like, because I feel like a real honor and privilege now, because I'm talking to the best minds in the world. And I honestly feel that people like you and all the people that come on my show are some of the best minds in the world. And what's happening to my show now, which I didn't realize was going to happen, is it is a library now of the best content on the internet. And I can see that when people really start to wake up, this show is going to be really, really important, because I've had some really, really awesome conversations like today, which was completely fascinating. So with that being said, Jessica, please tell the lovely people at the Conscious Man 7 where they can find you, how they can work with you, anything you have going on, any books, anything that you want to plug, and all of that great kind of stuff.
Oh, I so appreciate that opportunity to share it. I have a really cool website on the Circle platform called Intuition Mindset, and you can find that on intuitionmindset.me, M-E. Also, I'm on Substack at Intuition Mindset, where I espouse through lots of different articles, similar theories as we've talked about today, and very practical wisdoms and advice on how to access your intuition. And for anybody who'd like to work with me, that is also found on intuitionmindset.me. You can get a session diagnosing or connecting you with your emotional intelligence, or together we discover what your intuition has to tell you, which is always a fun session to participate in, to figure out just what somebody's inner wisdom wants them to know at that time. And they always leave with practical tools on how to develop their own intuition. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome, Jessica. And guys, links to everything Jessica will be in the description of this podcast. So guys, we talked a bit about fears and traumas today. And I am a firm believer that if you really want to level up your life, you want to really improve your mindset, the best place to start is with the physical body, because when you start to get into shape, you will by default improve your mindset. So if you would like to level up mentally, physically, and spiritually, and you would like to level up in other areas of your life, I can help you with that, because we help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle. So if you this resonates with you, and hearing what Jessica spoke about today gave you that nudge that you needed, your intuition is telling you, yes, Todd is the guy to help me, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriana_246, or my name, Todd Cave, on Facebook. Send me a message and let's see if you're a good fit for the Compound Body Training Army. And as we were talking about fears and traumas, you know that these are the things that cause a lot of self-sabotage. So if you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you are currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help relieving some fears and traumas, I can help you to get some magic mushrooms. So again, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriana_246, or my name, Todd Cave, on Facebook, and I will help you with this journey. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do that by visiting our merch store. We have some cool tank tops, hoodies, shirts, and sweats. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And I have on one of those shirts today. I have on the Todd and Me collection. So that is the name of the shirt for the store. So if you would like to support this podcast and help us to do research and get some more cool, amazing guests like Jessica, link to the Amazon store will be in the description of this podcast. Also, if you are listening on one of the podcast platforms and you're just not a fan of the ads and stuff, and you would like to get the podcast ad-free, you can join us on Patreon or Locals and become a member of either of those communities. So for a few bucks a month, you can get direct access to me. You will get early releases of podcasts, and you will get some behind the scenes things. So like the ayahuasca, the video that I did after my ayahuasca retreat last week, that will be exclusively on my Patreon. So things like that you get as perks for being part of our community. And if you send me a message on there, you will get a faster response than if you just did on social media. So again, links to the Locals or Patreon community will be in the description of this podcast, and you can get ad-free as well. Jessica, it has been an awesome conversation. So, I want to thank you for coming on to the show today. And guys, if this conversation lit something up in you, that quiet, powerful knowing that you've ignored for a long time, don't let it fade. If you found this conversation of value today, leave us a like, comment below your biggest takeaway, and share with someone who's ready to lead from within. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Adriano_246 or at the Conscious Man 7 podcast on Instagram. My name, Todd Cave, on Facebook to see what we're up on a daily. This has been another episode of the Conscious Man 7 podcast, where we have conversations that awaken the next level of human consciousness. Until next time, folks, stay conscious, stay connected, and trust the signal. Jessica, once again, thanks for being a guest on the Conscious Man 7 podcast. This was truly an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it. So guys, remember, keep smiling, keep shining, and keep being the change you want to see. Speak to you soon. Cheers and namaste.